Hi and welcome to this lesson on cards. In this lesson we're going to focus on particularly customer cards. Now to get started, click on the question mark or press F1 key to display Readysell's help. From the user guide, go to relationships, and from relationships we're going to go to cards. So in this lesson we're going to walk through cards. We're going to look at the key features of cards by going through each of the tabs on cards using the reference guide. I'm going to walk through each of these tabs and look at the details of the main fields on cards. So to access cards, click on Cards here, on the navigation menu. We'll use this first customer that displays. Now if you just want customer, use this filter to select just customer cards as I have. The first tab on cards is the status tab. This contains the most important information. Now I might just hide navigation there to give myself a little bit more room. Okay, so the user guide first tells us about the top section of cards, then walks us through each of the tabs. Let's have a look at this in the user guide. Here are all the tabs being explained, and here's the reference guide material on the buttons and the fields at the top of the screen before the child settings. So let's have a quick look at the buttons. There's a merge button on cards, and this allows you to merge any two cards together. When you decide to merge them, the pop-up window will ask you which cards do you want to keep. Let's look at where the merge is. Here's the merge button for cards. Highlight two cards, hit the merge button, and the pop-up window it gives you a chance to continue. I don't want to continue in this case, but if I were to continue, it would ask me which one do I want to keep, and it would merge them together. All the history would be merged, as well as any open invoices. Cards have view variants, and let's have a look at that. Up here, these are the view variants available for cards. Now, some of these are built in, and others may be view variants that you've saved using the view variants button here. If you get a view, if you customize the view of customers, you add extra fields on that you think might be useful for you, such as ABN, you can go and save that view. Let's say ABN view, and once you save it, that saved view will be included along with the standard view variants up here in this list, the top of the screen. Now also there's a filter. The filters are here. These are the standard filters available for customers. Now let's look at the next set of buttons. We have the standard related button on cards, like on most other classes in Readysell. Cards can have contracts, payments, etc., and only the ones that are relevant to the card that you're showing display. There's a refresh that refreshes your screen, export to Excel, and a full screen button and the question to invoke the help. Generally you don't need the question button very often, just press the F1. So let's look at these over on cards. There's our related. It shows the things that are related to this card. The refresh, just to freshen up your screen if something's changed since last time. Say a new sale has posted and hasn't displayed here yet, you can press refresh. The export, to allow you to export this list view over here, the items you've highlighted in the list view out to Excel, etc. And the full screen button that lets me pop this customer I'm on. Let's use that. Pop that up into a tab and gives me a fuller view of that card. Okay. Send to web button. This one publishes this customer to your website, providing the required information is filled in. It's a good way of getting customers onto the web without having to go to your website and manually create the customer. There's a notes button. The notes show any notes for that card, and then we have the header fields shown at the top of the card. So let's look at those. There's a notes button there, so if this card had any notes, that display up here. So let's go and add a note to the card so we can see that. Let's just call it test note. Now the notes you add to cards can be set to display on sales, display on service, display on purchase. So if these are ticked, whenever you do a sale for this card, or this customer for example, then this note would pop up on the sale. You can put conditions here. Even if you only wanted this customer to be referred to a certain person, you say refer to sales manager, etc. Display on purchase, again similar to what the message usage you'd have on sales, and display on purchase. So for a supplier, you're going to pop up a message each time you buy off that supplier, for example showing which days they deliver, and that information might be useful. So let's go and save this note, and once it's saved, you'll notice the notes button here shows there's one note for this customer. If I go to another customer, so this one doesn't have a note, back to this one, there's a note there. Now let's look at the header fields for customer card. The card ID is the way you primarily look up the customer. That's unique. Let's have a look at that. That's here. That's the card ID. You type that in onto sales screens, for example, when you're selling to this customer. The card type is just your way of classifying cards. You can have as many as you like. We start off with ABC customers, A being the best, but you can go and add additional types. Even there's another field for industry, but you can do types that are industries or any other classification you like. The status, an active card is one that you can use. Account closed can't be used at all, but can be seen. An archived card isn't even seen on most screens. It's just like it was deleted. And on stop means the card you can't can place sales orders, but the card can't complete a sale. When a card's on stop, we do allow you to sell to them because we want to capture their sales, but we don't want to supply to them until whatever reason for their being on stop is resolved. But if a card is account closed, they can't even put in an order. And that's explained on the user guide here. Now, obviously cards have got a name. Now we're going to have a look at each of these tabs on the card one at a time. I'm going to start with the status settings on a card. So the status is this first tab on the card. The first field in the status tab is the date the card was created. The next is the created by, that is the person that created it. There are a number of ranks, like the overall rank, and that's calculated by a process that runs regularly. If it's blank, it means the process is not turned on. If it's got something in it, it means that daily task to go and re-rank your customers is running. There are some criteria on how you rank your customers that can be set to suit your site. The last sale invoice date shows you the date of the last invoice. That's useful when you can drag that to the list view, and that's useful when you're reviewing your customers to see which ones are performing. The last purchase invoice date, that's useful for suppliers, obviously. You can use it for doing supplier credits, so you shouldn't, but you can kind of attach something, use that as the date when you're putting a credit in, but also you can use it to see if you are regularly dealing with them. The last payment, obviously useful when you're contacting the customer, chasing up their accounts, so you can drag that onto a view of the customer balances and chase up the last sale date. So if we were, for example, using, say, the customer balances view, because we were considering which customers need to get phone calls about the state of their account, then the customer last payment date would be useful information. So let's drag this wider. There's a view showing the balances for the customer, the last time you contacted them, and it might be useful on this screen in particular to add the last payment date so you can see the last day that they actually paid something off their account balance. Then you've got some average monthly performance figures, which are calculated to just give you a quick monthly overview of how the customer is performing. Again, that's built by an overnight task. Now we're ready to look at the tabs that are on the status tab down here, these sub tabs. Most important one being the balances, which shows the current customer and supplier balances. Because a card can be both a customer and a supplier, they're shown separately. The customer open items shows any invoices and credits and payments for the customer, any transactions for the customer that still have a balance. Now you can see the open items that have been paid by clicking this all open items. So if, for example, this one were paid, let's go and pay it. Once this item is paid, by default it'll disappear off that list. So I'm just going to post that payment. When that is finished posting, then the item disappears, but you can see the old ones that have been paid by showing all items. Supplier open items are much the same as card open items if this as customer open items. If this customer was also a supplier, then any supplier open items that are currently outstanding would show here. Allocations is something you won't use very often. That just shows the allocation history. We just allocated one payment for the customer, and so you have that allocation there. You can go and look at the past allocations for the customer and see which payments paid for which invoices in the past, and you can go and reverse the allocations if they were done in error, and that rolls that allocation back out. You can see the product movements for the customer for the last 3 months by default. You can see all product movements if you want to, going back as long as the customer has been dealing with you. You can also see any shipments, which are any physical product movements that have happened for this customer. Any invoices, being any financial charges. And by clicking on the show transaction, you can pop that invoice back up on the screen if you want to. Let's display one. And then that allows you to go and reprint it, or answer any questions the customer may have, should they be calling you. Messages are normally emails. So these are mostly emails you've sent to the customer using the new email button, or automatic emails that have been sent by batch runs, such as when you emailed the statement. So if, for example, a customer rang you and said you didn't email the statement, you could go here, you could see if we did email them their statement, and you could forward the email to them again. Messages can include other kinds of messages such as SMS. And loyalty gives you the loyalty position of the customer, how many points they've gained, how many points they've redeemed, and what their loyalty points balance is. All this is explained in detail here in the user guide. As you can see, all those fields are listed, and there's more explanation on each of those tabs. So take the time to have a look through and get an understanding of the card status tab. Now we're going to look at the general tab on cards. And to do that, we're going to parallel this in the user guide. Let's click on General Settings on the user guide so we can see the user guide information describing all the fields on the General Settings tab in more detail. I'm going to just roll through this quickly on the screen, but you can see all of the tabs on the General Settings are described in the user guide here. So I'm going to use this customer again. Okay, so on the General Settings, there's Trading As. That's where if the customer has a different trading name to their company name. Their ABM, which is important, and that's used for some reporting. And you need to know that for most of your customers, if at all possible. Their website URL, which is the address of their website, which allows you to call their website up from inside Readysell. Their parent card. So Readysell has a charge to card and a parent card. The charge to card is the card to which your invoices are charged to. Normally invoices for this customer will go to the customer themselves, but if you set the charge to be a different customer, for example, when you had many offices and with a head office, then you can make all the charges go to head office. The parent here is the parent card for purposes of printing. You may have a case where you have the charge is retained by the branches, but you want to print different information to head office, even though you don't want to charge things to head office. That's where you use a parent card. Charge to, that's the person you charge things to. Parent is the card to which you print. So for example, I might say that the parent of this business is 3M Australia, but when sales go through, charge them to Penrith Enterprise, but send, in addition to any invoice information that goes to Penrith Enterprises, also send an invoice off to the parent, 3M, and that invoice can be in a different format to the one that you send to this enterprise itself. So this enterprise might get an unpriced invoice, send the prices off to head office. All right. The CRM tab has a range of CRM fields. I don't want to go through those in detail here, but they are explained in the user guide. Some of the most important things are the number of staff and the industry, as that's used for integration to third-party CRM products as well as by Readysell. The bank accounts, if the customer still issues you checks, for example, then you need to know the bank accounts that are acceptable from that customer. It's obviously a dying area, but if you do need to get such information, that's where you need to put it. The categories, these are the categories that the customer normally deals with. You wouldn't use this very often, but it allows you to target your marketing. So if you have a customer that mainly buys furniture, you can add that category here and say, in respect to furniture, the salesperson for this customer is the furniture salesperson. But in respect to all other sales, then the salesperson could be someone else. So you can do specialized salespersons for a customer. Now the groups are used for payment purposes. You can add a list of cards to the groups, and then when a payment comes in, that payment can get allocated to any card in the group. So if you had, for example, post offices, and you had a group of post offices, each post office gets charged independently, but the money for all the post offices came from head office, then you'd put in here all your post offices in the same group, and when you get the one lump sum of money from head office, you could allocate that money out to all the branches. Now the next thing we're going to have a look at is the addresses tab. And again, we're going to synchronize this review with the user guide. So click here in the user guide for addresses. The user guide page on addresses describes in a lot of detail about how addresses work. Each address is normally an accounts address, that is like a post office box address, a delivery address, which is a place you can deliver to, a physical address. Now a physical address is particular to equipment in the service module. You need a physical address to be the address of a machine, because within a building the service technician needs to know how to get to the machine. So the physical address is more precise about how to navigate around even inside the building to get to the machine, and your postal address and your PO box for the customer. Now on addresses, we don't have any particular buttons, and we have standard address fields. I'm going to walk through those briefly by having a look at the actual card here. So here's address. As you can see, we've got a filter, active addresses or all addresses. So if you no longer use an address, you can archive it, and if you archive the address stays there, but you can't see it anymore. You need to archive an address if you've ever used it and you want to stop using it anymore. If you had a customer with many building sites, for example, and you're delivering to all the building sites, the addresses would be opening and closing all the time. They have been used on past sales, so you have to archive them because you can't delete them. But you don't want them to just stay in the list. Okay, that's archiving is available in a number of things in Readysell. So addresses have their own names. This name is different to the name on the cards. You can see here this address name is reception, while the card name is Penrith Enterprises. It's important you don't leave this blank, because otherwise the system won't know the address to print on invoices. They have 4 streets, normally you only need 1 or 2, but you've got 4 in case. If you've got a suburb, now a suburb is validated against the Australian Postcodes database, so that suburb must exist in that database. If you don't find it there, you can go and add a new one, but you can't just pick any combination. It must be a valid suburb. You see the new button, that lets you create a new suburb. Here are all the suburbs that exist at the moment, so it must be one that's existent in that file. Now the tick boxes and addresses are really important. Now the way to review addresses, this is what I'm doing, is a good way to review one address, but I'll show you that the way to review all your addresses is to use this special list here, addresses, on the navigation menu. This is designed particularly for first time users. It shows you all addresses from all cards in one place, and you can go and mass change them from here. You do all your maintenance in one place instead of having to click through every card one at a time. That's especially useful if you go to Tools and turn modification checking to on close only, in which case the system will only save when you finish all your changes and press the save button. So that's going to save you having to so I'm going to pop say one address up here, and I'll just type a change in, and save it. And see, I can just do all my changes to the addresses here, and I can use this tool here to go and change the way I do my saves, so they only have to do them at the end if I want to. So back on last bit of addresses, there is also a carrier, so you can specify a particular carrier by address instead of having to specify it by customer. Same with delivery run. If you had many systems have the carrier and the delivery run on the card itself, we've found that it's better to have it on the address, because obviously the card could have many addresses and the appropriate courier and the appropriate delivery run can vary. You can change the charge for travel time to a particular address that's used by the service module, and you can put a estimated or usual travel time in that's again used by the service module. Addresses can even have notes attached to them, such as hours when they're open. Say a delivery address might say open between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Working days only, and so that note can print out when the address is used. Now we're going to have a look at contacts. Click on contacts to display the user guide for contacts. Contacts are like addresses. You do maintenance for individual contacts on the card, but you access the contacts list from the navigation menu to do mass updating. So for the card, here with the contacts, I'll go and add some in a moment, but if you have lots of contacts to work on, you use this contacts list from the navigation menu, and that shows you all contacts. This is efficient if you have to do a full review of contacts, so you've just converted to Readysell, or if you want to do a lot of contacts maintenance. So having said that, our focus today is on cards, so let's look at contacts on cards. I'll click New. Now I've got a new contact. Each contact has a name. They have a job description. Now the job description is used by the automated marketing system, so you may find that there's a limited number of job descriptions that you should be using. I'll say manager. There's a web ID. This is their login to your website. Their phone number. All systems getting more focused on phone numbers for individuals, and their mobile, of course. Fax number is there, but pretty redundant these days. Email address, especially if you're using automated marketing, or if you're using CRM. The role, and the role perhaps more important than the job description. The role is a fixed number of roles. This can be set by system references. This is definitely used by the automated marketing. So the janitorial role is the one you're going to want to target for your cleaning products. Call cycle. How often do you call on them? 8 weeks, for example. Marketing opt-out, if you turn that on, then this user is skipped from the automated marketing. LinkedIn profile, that's getting more important these days. The web password, we don't yet have the Facebook connection because we're really business oriented, so we find LinkedIn is more relevant. And then these ticks down here for the contact control its behavior. You should only have one primary contact on each card, and then the purchasing officer is the person to which sales go. So these ticks are from the point of view of the contact. So for example, our purchase order go to the contact salesperson, and the purchasing officer at the contact will be the person that sends orders to us. Archived is used if you no longer want to use this contact. Let's just save this new contact. Great, that's a little bit about contacts. Now all of the details are described here in more detail on the user guide. Reread this bit. Really, these little tick boxes about what the contact is used for is very important. And if your office brand store, just make note of how the automated marketing integrates into contacts. Now, let's have a look at cases. So cases are a way of logging CRM calls or general queries from the customer, and if you need to have a campaign, Readysell has a campaigns module in relationships. If you need to have a campaign, you can generate whole lots of cases, and also customers can log cases, and your staff can log cases about requests from customers that aren't quite covered by other transactions. Things like campaigns, things like general queries get tracked through cases. Machines, if the customer has any machines, they'll display here, and then you can drill down into the machines. Favorites, we're organising web integration for favorites. So the favorites here is going to be very useful once we get the web integration going, because if you have web integration, favorites are a great onboarding tool for new customers. You could create a customer by copying another customer. You could then bring over the favorites list and then publish that favorites list with the customer up to the website with the send to web button. That way, as soon as this new customer contacts your website, all their favorites are set up and you're pushing them towards the way you want them to spend. We're hoping to make that two-way integration, so when a customer adds new products to the web, that'll flow down into favorites so you can see it as well. We'll just have a look at the user guide for favorites. There's the user guide for favorites and for machines. Now, there's not that much in here yet, but as we keep an eye on this, because when we get the web integration, we'll flesh that out a little bit. Have a look at the user guide for machines. And machines are covered very fully in the service module, so this just gives you a brief summary of the main machine fields. Have a look at machines in the service module if you want to see more about machines. Now we'll have a quick look at schedule. The schedule entry on each card will show any meetings, service orders or other transactions for that card that have been scheduled for the card. Now, in our case, it's empty, but any number of events, you can go and create new events, you can schedule them in, you can view the information in different days, and this schedule for the card links up to the whole of enterprise schedule, where you can see everything that's scheduled for your business. And there's a RSS feed of the schedule, so you can see things that are scheduled, like calls to the customer, should you want to schedule them, service orders for the customer. You can see all them on your mobile device if it can take a RSS feed to its calendar, or on your Outlook on your desktop computer at the office. You have a calendar displaying there that shows this schedule. Tags are another way of inserting similar to a custom field. In fact, tags are pretty much replaced now by custom fields. You can still create a tag like a post-it note and stick it on cards, and you can filter only those cards that have that tag on them. But really, custom fields does pretty much the same thing now, and so tags are just there for people that have been using it in the past for backward compatibility. Nowadays, you'd tend to use custom fields. Cards could have notes. Now, if a card has a note, the note, like this note here, the note will display here. You can go and create new notes for the card here, and as you add notes, those notes will display up here on the notes button at the top, as we talked about a little bit earlier. And notes can be set to display in different contexts. Custom fields, as we were talking about, allow us to create a special field and attach it to customers in addition to all the other fields that we currently have. And I'll have a quick look at how you'd create a custom field. If you wanted to have an extra field on cards, just say you wanted a custom field to say that you want to make this customer part of a telemarketing campaign. Then you'd go to custom fields in administration here. You'd make the required custom field. Let's say a telemarketing customer. You could use this for things like customer gets printed catalog, those kind of things as well. Anything where you just want to record another bit of information. And let's say this is going to be just another true or false, and we're going to say that this telemarketing customer property applies to cards. Now we go and save it, and now the next time we make a card, or that night a processor will run through and add that custom field to all cards, but right away if I make a new card, then that custom field will be available on the new card, and then your list of cards can be filtered by that custom field. So I can go and put a value into that custom field there. This one is a telemarketing customer, the ones who blank aren't. And that's custom fields for customers. Attachments are simply just files that are attached to this card. So you can drag and drop extra information like spreadsheets, any other Word documents, and attach them to the card if you'd like to, and other processes in the system sometimes attach them. Now, before I get on to settings, which is quite detailed, I might just quickly also mention this customer history button. This customer history button has a whole lot of other tabs that would just take up too much space to put them on the card. So instead of putting them on the card, we've just put them on the history. So you can see sales orders, service orders, movements, sales by day, each day. So let's look at the different months, what's been going on. Sales by month, sales by product, what product they've been purchasing, sales by the category, so which category spend they're buying, which month. Sales by territory, so which territory and which salesperson is happening for that customer. Sales by territory by salesperson. Sales by period by product, so which month, which product they're buying. And sales by period by product, services by product. So a whole lot of extra information. Really, there's just not enough room to fit it all in on the card, so they are here on the custom history button. Now let's have a look at settings. And let's also continue paralleling our help and our screen. Okay, let's continue paralleling our help and our screen. So this is the user guide for card settings. As you can see, It walks you through in a lot of detail what the statuses do. All of the options in the settings tab are explained. The effect of supply type. Normally you want to use the allocate supply type, but supply type has a lot of implications, so it's explained in great detail here. All the various fields, all the possible values for the invoice modes and for the customer orders and for max shipments. So again, I don't have detailed time to take you through every one of these details and explain all the options, but make sure you go through the settings tab on the user guide, because all of these details probably apply to your business in one way or the other, and unless you're really going through them and assessing all of these options in here, you really won't understand how to set up your cards properly, because the settings really drive everything else. Now what I'll do is I'll go to this card and I'll walk through the main settings quickly to give you an overview. Just remember to look through this in the reference guide to get the full details. So card status allows you to set a status for the card, particularly for CRM tracking, whether it's a lead, a prospect, whether it's subject to legal. It's another way of classifying your cards, similar in a way to card type. There's a bit of overlap, but card status is a bit more specific, while card type is more flexible. Discount from list, you can specify a discount from list for the card, like 5%, etc. Tax code, you'd hardly ever use that, but that would be where you had, for example, a customer that was overseas. You could set their tax code to be exempt, and then when you sold to them, no GST would apply, even though the products have GST. Available on POS is only if you have the standalone POS system. Normal Readysell POS doesn't take notice of this, and so most of our users would find that that's not important to you. Send documents to parent. That's to do with that parent printing option over in the more general settings, so you can send all their invoices to the parent instead of sending them to the card itself. Now these are the customer settings. The first thing is the customer tender. Now most account customers, you're going to want to have them set to be account. That way every time you sell to them, even if you do service work for them, the tenders would default to account. The sale would just go straight on their account without asking. Leave it blank, the system will ask how they're paying each time. The payment tender is the way the customer normally pays when they're making account payments. So look, it'd be quite common for them to pay their account by direct debit. The payment terms are set up in the system administration area. There's some payment terms are a number of days from end of month. So let's have a look at what I might do. I might just add the property that we care about. That is, let's go add that rather than going to system admin. The type of payment term. Let's add that to our list, right? So some payment terms are from invoice date and some are from end of month. So this first one here is 14 days from invoice date. So if the invoice is on the 1st of the month, the invoice would be due on the 14th. While other ones like this, let's say 30 days from end of month is a really common one. That one, if the invoice is on the first day of this month, then the invoice is, the system goes to the beginning of the next month, then counts 30 days and makes the invoice due 30 days into the next month. So be aware of the difference between the invoice date and end of month date. Most of your customers will probably be 30 days from end of month. The price level allows you to just set and forget a price level for the customer. So I'm going to say this customer just gets the government price all the time. If you do nothing, they'll get the default price level. Credit limit, let's set it to, if you set it to 0, that means there's no particular credit limit. The customer can buy as much as they like. If you set it to say a number like 10,000, then you'll get a warning when they try to get to when a sale would cause their balance in their account to exceed the credit limit, and that can also be set to be a blocker. You've got default carrier, so you can put preference in here as to which carrier the customer prefers. Now this can be overridden for particular sales. This copies onto the sale and you can change it. The customer start date is different to the date the customer was created, because the card was created, because you could create a card but not have them as an actual customer for some time. You might be working on them, then there'll be a date when they sign up and you actually put a start date. If you archive a customer or they stop training, you should try to put a customer end date. That helps you know how long ago they stopped. It might be worth a year later, might be worth ringing them again. The staff could have changed, might be worth going and chasing them up and seeing if you could reactivate their account. The cost center, that's in case the customer has a number of cost centers, you can specify which one this customer stands for. You might typically create a whole range of cards being different cost centers within the same enterprise. You put their cost centers there. The contract start date and contract end date allow you to specify override contract start and end dates for the customer. Really not used much. Generally, when you put a customer on a contract, you can override the start and end date there, and that's how I do it these days. So we wouldn't use these fields on the card anymore. That's the way we used to do it, just there for compatibility. The max shipment sale is how many shipments are allowed per sale. If you do naught, that means they'll take as many shipments as you like. We suggest that most dealers find that 2 is a good compromise. So when they place an order for 10 things, the system will ship as many as it can, so it can ship 3 of them right away. Then it'll wait for the whole of the other 7 to be filled before it ships it. That way they only get 2 shipments. If a customer was in a remote area and had expensive freight, you might set them to 1 shipment, and when an order comes in, the system would just wait for the whole of the order to be ready and supply it at once. The invoice modes that you most commonly use are manual invoicing and batch invoicing. The options are manual, that means just invoice them one at a time. 1 invoice per order, that means when they place an order, if there's 3 shipments, only invoice the shipments when all 3 have been shipped. So you typically set the system up to do delivery dockets for the first 2 in that case. When the last shipment's done, the system will invoice it. Batch invoicing is normally talked about as monthly invoicing, and what that means is never invoice the customer until you tell it to. And what you'd normally do is let all the shipments go through for the month, send them out delivery dockets, and then at the end of the month do a batch invoice run, invoice all the shipments onto one big invoice for the whole month and send that invoice to the customer, perhaps instead of a statement. The customer order required setting, no order required means you don't have to do it. Order required is a hard order required. You just got to put an order in every time. And even tougher than that is the order required warn on duplicate. That means that if you do a duplicate order, even if you've typed something in, that's not good enough. You've got to put, it warns you if it's a duplicate. And the toughest customer order is this one, unique customer order required. That means every order must have a distinct customer order, and the customer can't use the same order reference more than once. Supply type, you're generally going to want allocated. The only other one you might want in stock, but really it's redundant. In stock would mean only ship the goods when they're in stock, but if you set the max shipments to 1, you get the same result. So generally you're just going to put them to allocated. You're going to want backorder allowed to be on for all customers, so just make sure that defaults to on, don't turn it off. Now we'll have a little look at these tabs. Customer reports. Again, this is covered in more detail in the user guide. I'll just scroll to the right page here. It's the end of the customer settings. Yeah, customer reports. So this tells you all of the controls around customer reporting. Okay, I'll just again do it in summary. Refer to the user guide for detail. Delivery docket method manual. That's the most common one. That's just when you ask for it. Print immediately or email background. If you're going to email it, you're probably going to do email background, because we want to email it only at the end of the day, not right away. Email immediately and prompt. Print immediately would print it and email it. So you can do combinations like print immediately or print immediately and email immediately, would print it immediately and email immediately in background, or print immediately and email immediately prompt would print it and email it and prompt you about the email. So you can mix and match these options. And then the delivery docket is which report layout to use for delivery dockets. The invoice method, how to go about printing the invoice. I like the email batch automatic. Print and email batch automatic. I like this one. That one would print a copy of the invoice and email the invoice out at end of day, say at 7 p.m. That gives you time to go and correct any errors on invoices before the end of day. If you email immediately with the invoices gone to the customer, and if you made a mistake, it's too hard, it was too late to go and correct it. So think about what those settings should be. You probably want to use consistent settings on most of your customers. The statement method, email is the one you want. Just get your email addresses right and then get them all onto email. You don't want to have to print any. If you have to, you can set it to print. And then the statement is just which statement report to use. There's a number of them. Split meter invoices by machine. You generally don't want that to be on. If you turn it on, what happens is if you have a service based meter charge run and the system generates invoices for the machines, it'll do one invoice for every single machine. If the customer has many machines, that can be a pain in the neck. Now, a few customers want it, so just turn it on only after talking to your customer. Sales reporting, again, is described in more detail in the user guide. But briefly, the primary salesperson that's the person that is primarily responsible for sales for that customer. So that's what you'd typically call your salesperson when you're talking about the customer. There's also a sales territory. So in addition to salesperson, you can have territories and salesperson. So you might have territory of Southern New South Wales, salesperson of Sam Smith. And customers might be in one territory but have different salespersons. There can be overlap between the two. It gives you two different ways to look at it. You could even have like a few chief sales marketing managers involved. They'd be in charge of sales territories, and inside the territories you could have different salesperson. Sales groups allow you to another way of grouping up your sales. And show sales in reports, you always want that on. If you turn that off, then the cube-based sales report would just ignore all sales for this customer. You'd only use it for something like staff sales, where you don't want staff sales polluting your sales figures, or in-house sales to your own business. Apart from that, generally the rule is leave that turned on. Web integration controls connections to your various web services. And again, this is covered here in the user guide. And just read that through, and that gives you good information on the web integration. I don't think I can't add much to what the user guide says really. Minimum for web approval, that's where your customer has web approval turned on and they can only buy up to a limit. The other settings, best to just go through the user guide for those. Loyalty mode, you generally won't need this, but if you do, Readysell can disable loyalty for customers. So if you were starting to use the loyalty system, one approach would be to disable loyalty for all customers. Just turn it on for the ones you want, especially maybe just one to try loyalty out, and then over time turn it on for more customers. We also have some special overrides. A default is the normal behavior. So if you turned it from disabled, you normally go to default, which just means get loyalty in the normal way. But you can go and multiply or override, right? So multiply means give them so many points. So like multiply all points for this customer by 2. So you might do that for a short period for a new customer, for example. And points override gives them a completely different. There's also a customer portals tab, which is for future use. That's going to be towards allowing customers to connect up as a data portal onto the Readysell system directly, and really not available yet. That's a future development item. So now let's look at supplier settings. So supplier settings again are covered in detail in the user guide, so I'm not going to try to cover those very fully. I'll just walk through the main elements. So there is an account, okay, and that is the account that applies for this supplier. If you want to override the normal account, you can specify it. The supplier tender, that's the tender normally used for the supplier when you're making payments against the supplier. The payment terms, and again this follows those terms rules we talked about with customers from invoice date or from end of month. The supplier account number, that's your account code with the supplier. So this is used on communications such as when you send remittances off to the supplier, you put your account code on it. The minimum order value, this is used by automated purchasing, so we might say that it's got to be $500, and if an automated purchase order is below the minimum order value, then an error message displays in red on the automated purchasing screen. The supplier's credit limit, that's for your information so that you know what your credit limit is with the supplier. The reorder cycle is a way of grouping suppliers, so if you purchased all suppliers at 3 p.m. except for a few, you could put most of your suppliers onto a reorder cycle of 3 p.m. and the other ones on the 5 p.m. cycle. You also can make cycles like day of week, so if you buy one supplier on Tuesday and Thursday, you can make a reorder cycle like TUTH, Tuesday, Thursday, and then it makes it easier. You can go and do a set of purchase run rules and specify which reorder cycles you want and encapsulate the current skills that your purchasing officer has as to which days they need to order from. Just build that into the suppliers, build that into your automatic rules for your purchase runs, and that results in more information about the business being stored in Readysell, less guesswork, and improves efficiency. You can even, we've had people get this so good that they can just pin it up on the wall and have a junior person in the business run the purchase runs each day based on automatic reorder cycles, initial review of the result, and then pass that on, so the purchasing manager just picks up the purchase runs that have already been built and does the editing. Lead time is the supplier's lead time, say 2 days for this one. Now that lead time can get overridden for individual products by the lead time on the product. The X works lead time is for cases where longer term lead time. So the total lead time might be 40 days and the X works lead time might be 7 days if you were ordering stock from overseas. The operating days is just when the supplier is operating. They're mostly either 7 days or Monday to Friday. The stock service branch code is that's for where the supplier has multiple warehouses. You can store which warehouse you want the stock from. So rather than just sending it off to the supplier, you can specify, please ship from this warehouse for me. Some suppliers can ignore minimum order quantity, and they're such as wholesalers. So where there's a minimum order quantity on the product, the wholesaler might be willing to sell it to you in eaches. So if you ignore minimum order quantity, they're purchasing or buy smaller units from that supplier. Supplier order required forces the supplier. So when you purchase from a supplier, you must supply a supplier order reference to for the supplier when you send the order off. Auto email remittance. Generally, you want that on. That means when you pay the supplier, send them off a remittance automatically. And you're always going to want backward allowed. Pretty much always. That means that when a purchase receipt comes in, if not all the goods are received, leave the balance on back order. You may have a few suppliers where when you buy off them, if they can't ship it the first time, they then cancel the rest of the order. But that's really uncommon, so don't tick that. And all of these options are covered here in more detail in the user guide. So that concludes our detailed walkthrough of cards. I hope you find that useful. There is a lot more information about cards, of course, but this should give you a solid beginning to understanding the concepts on cards. And the main message I'd like to leave you with is just make use of that help system. The F1 has the details, so don't guess. Use this video, use the help system, and you'll get on fine. Thanks for your time today.